You know what I find funny is that the same conservatives in the media who have attacked Taylor Lorenz for years because she took COVID seriously are now suddenly very offended and clutching their pearls about the United Healthcare CEO's assassination and took the position of understanding where the vast majority of people are coming from on this in our reactions. Buckle in, fam, we're going through the story. So we talked about yesterday how Ben Shapiro was epically ratioed with facts and logic. I love that his thing says facts don't care about your feelings. Indeed, bitch. Indeed. Because he was doing rich person pearl clutching. How dare you? And he opened his show attacking people in the media for writing a broader analysis on this, including people like Taylor Lorenz and Nathan J. Robinson.
Pseudo-journalists like Taylor Lorenz should not only be rejected from polite society,
He's calling
all of the publications that hired her knowing she was a nut and then promoted her knowing she was a nut should be called on the carpet by the American public.
Are you trying to cancel
the Brian
her?
Thompson shooting is a bleeding edge indicator of
I
where
thought
the
you
country could
hated
go.
cancel culture. He's all pseudo-journalist. What? Really? You're really criticizing other people for not being journalists? Are you fucking serial?
Companies. And of course, it's not just Taylor Lorenz. Socialist Nathan Robinson, a complete useless leech on the ass of society, posted himself, quote, live your life in such a way that people will be sad when you die. That was above a...
You want to talk about projection? He's calling Nathan J. Robinson, who is a journalist, a useless leech on the ass of society, and calling Taylor Lorenz, who is a journalist, a crazy person, when he literally is a Nepo baby. He has absolutely no experience in journalism. He's not a journalist. He sits there in the comfort of his studio paid for by billionaires so that he can do the work on behalf of the billionaire class and gives shitty, outdated, zombie Reagan talking points to his audience every single day and gets paid tens of millions of dollars to do so from the comfort of his home studio. And he's talking about other people being leeches? Come on. Hypocrisy aside, though, it's very telling the way that he sees you or regular people or working journalists and the way he sees the rich. Their lives have more value to him. Because to him, if you're a journalist or if you're a working class person, you're a leech on the ass of society. But if you're a billionaire or a multimillionaire CEO that makes their money leeching off of the American people, their sickness and suffering, you're a brilliant businessman. I can't think of a better term to describe the CEO venture capitalist class than useless leech on society. They don't even believe it when they say that CEOs are so important and that's why they have to be paid 500 times their average employee because no one can do the job they do. They're so brilliant. Really, if that's the case, then how come Brian Thompson's corpse wasn't even fully off the street before they replaced him with a new CEO? We're told all the time, remember? The reason why you don't get paid shit and the CEOs make tens of millions of dollars at these companies is because they're irreplaceable, man. They're smart and you're dumb. Who cares that it's your labor, your creativity that drives and creates these profits for these CEOs? You're not important, so you don't get paid. They're important. They're the brains of the operation, okay? They're the important ones. That's why they get paid the big bucks and you don't. But apparently they don't really believe that, which is why they replaced him faster than Luigi Mangione could say gabagool. He gives the whole game away there, just in those statements he makes about Taylor Lorenz and Nathan J. Robinson. He thinks that the elites are just more important than you. They're just more valuable than you. Yes, Ben, and your job of regurgitating talking points from the latest right-wing and libertarian billionaire think tank is a vital contribution to society. We don't know what we would do without it. So anyway, the journalist Taylor Lorenz went on TMZ to have a discussion about the tweets she put out. Listen very carefully to the way that the guys interviewing her frame this.
It was about what's behind this. On its face, it looks like you're saying there should be open season on some of these CEOs.
Absolutely not. So let me just be super clear. No, we should not CEOs. No, we should not go around people in the street. But I think what's really missing in all of these conversations is context. When you see the entire internet, left and right, united around one thing, and that is celebrating, I hate to say it too, the death of a healthcare CEO, you have to ask why. And I don't think that has been discussed at all. There's no discussions of the systemic cruelty in our healthcare system or the fact that thousands of Americans die because CEOs like this one and others deny essential life-saving care to Americans. And I think that's where this anger is coming from. And of course, people are going to get a little carried away and celebrate, but they're celebrating because it feels like a victory. It feels like somebody stood up to this barbaric, evil, cruel, violent system. For once. And of course, he matched it with violence, which, again, we are not condoning here, okay? That is not the solution to this. But I do think a lot of people it's got people talking.
And I hear what you're saying about getting people talking, but I want to go back, Taylor, to that. And I know you later in the day you said, look, what I want here is a campaign of peaceful letter writing.
Pause. I love how he's like, I hear you, but let's go back to talking about your tweet. 100% what she said there. People are not talking about why people from all over the political spectrum are coming together to celebrate this, because the elites and the ruling class don't want people to talk about why. That's why he immediately jumps to, I mean, I hear you, but do you condemn Hamas? I mean, the assassination of healthcare CEOs and rich executives. I mean, it's giving the same energy. Because in the same way that the pro-clutchers are always like, but do you condemn Hamas? Because they don't actually want to talk about what was behind the root cause of October 7th. This is the same energy, okay? They're like, yeah, but we don't really want to talk about the systemic violence of the healthcare system. So, like, don't you think murking people is bad? And this isn't unique to this clip. You'll notice that any discussion about this on mainstream media, corporate media, any discussion among the elites and the rich, all of it is about the tut-tutting and the tone policing, lecturing people and scolding people on their emotions rather than asking why people feel this way. None of them want to ask why.
I just want to put it up there one more time and see how you feel about it, because this is the one that did sound like you were calling for violence. You said, and people wonder why we want these executives dead.
Yes, people do. I'm speaking to the sentiment. People do want these executives dead. If you have
But you
watched,
said we want them dead, and I guess that's...
I mean, look, I'm going to say I'm with the people in the sense that if you have watched a loved one die because insurance has denied them life-saving essential health care, it is natural to wish that the people who run those systems would suffer the same fate as your loved one. And millions of people across America have had this experience. So yes, am I, when I say, do I wish someone dead, is that advocating for them to be killed? No, of course not. But am I going to shed tears or have a lot of empathy for somebody that has facilitated the deaths of thousands of innocent Americans through intentionally denying them coverage? I am not going to, weep over it. I do think that loss of life is a tragedy. I'm very against death generally, as a principle. But I think, again, why do we mourn certain deaths and condone other deaths of innocent, vulnerable people?
Yeah, I get
Sound
that. From
familiar?
a different angle, when you look at this, do you think his death, maybe you should say, is different from dying from an illness, which is horrible?
I would say United Healthcare has people, just to be clear. I would say United Healthcare has thousands of Americans by denying them coverage.
And by the way, I get your point. I do get your point on that. Do you think that Brian Thompson's is a good thing in terms of what it's done to bring all of this to the forefront?
I don't think, here's the reality. This is something that is clearly affecting millions of people's lives. It has made the media and politicians pay attention. I think it's a tragedy that is what is forcing people in power to pay attention to this issue that is affecting everyone's lives. Again, one CEO shouldn't have to be for them to care about the tens of thousands of other innocent Americans, right? That should be national news as well. So yeah, I would love if it was not. I would love if we just had a more just system and politicians and the media paid attention to the violence that happens every day at the hands of these insurance companies.
Do you view this almost like a revolution, where sometimes there is that kind of collateral damage, which may be the death of some of these people, but are you viewing this kind of like a revolution?
I think a lot of people online are. I think that's deeply concerning because, again, we don't want a violent revolution in this country. We want nonviolent change. We want systemic change.
Does the way that all this framing is going sound familiar to you? Look at how the guy stopped in his tracks to say, don't say killed, say murder. And I'm very glad that Taylor Lorenz stopped them and said, just to be clear, that's exactly what places like United Healthcare do. That is exactly what these health insurance companies do. There is never any reporting on the viciousness of our for-profit health insurance industry. How just disgusting it really, really is. And the amount of money these corrupt ghouls spend in lobbying every year so that Congress won't do anything about it. And all of the advertisers are big pharma and the big health insurance industries on all the news networks, so the news refuses to talk about it. And the journalists, a lot of them refuse to cover it. But just notice the difference in the language of how they talk about the CEO and the way they talk about regular people. When she rightly points out what United Healthcare and all these companies do to the average American by denying them life-saving care is murder. It's like, yeah, I get what you're saying. But like, on to the important thing, don't just say he died, okay? You've got to point out that what happened to him was violent, because to them, he is a real person. He is an important person. How does that, I can't help but have that remind me of the way that Palestinians are talked about in the media versus Israelis. And to be clear, I am not comparing Americans to Palestinians in that way, okay? Because a lot of people don't understand how to like hold nuance in their head and hold multiple thoughts in their head at once, such as Americans have to deal with the predatory nature and the viciousness and the violence of our for-profit healthcare system that preys on people's sickness and their desperation to live and profits off their misery and treats them as disposable, but the healthcare CEOs and the ones profiting off their deaths like people. The disparate treatment in the way that they talk about poor and working class Americans and the violence they experience at the hands of the health insurance companies and the way that they talk about Palestinians. What I'm trying to say is, and two things can be true at once, it is both true that Americans are suffering immensely, especially poor and working class Americans dealing with the violence of this healthcare industry on purpose systemically. And also, we are incredibly privileged in the West compared to anyone not in the West. And even with that violence that Americans deal with at the hands of the healthcare companies, we are also privileged by virtue of being American. It's very real, but it is not the same thing as the dehumanization, systemic violence for decades, and oppression and occupation that the Palestinians live under. Both of these things can and are true. All I'm saying is that the way they're talking about sure does remind me of that. Anyway, great interview. This is probably the only time you're going to see it because most people in our elite class, media class, corporate class, ruling class have no interest in discussing this, have absolutely no interest in discussing the deeper causes of this and the reasons why Americans all over the country are celebrating this. But just because they don't and won't does not mean that we should not continue to do so. We need to continue to have this discussion. Also, side note, people should demand that they release this entire manifesto. A lot of times our ruling class treats us like babies that can't actually handle reading something in its entirety, and they shouldn't be able to make that choice for us. We should have the right to see the whole thing and not cherry picked based on what the elites in the ruling class want us to see.